Hey there! Get ready to listen to the affairs of the Black diasporas. You're about to learn, live, and enjoy life lessons we Black people have experienced throughout history. Welcome to Unlocking Our Voices, where we seek to unify the Black diasporas, eradicate inequality, racial profiling, and the general lack of respect. Let's open our mouths and minds with your host, Greg Fuller.
Garvey's still alive. 135. Garvey's still alive. Genocidal fire down in Madagascar. They have treated us improper. We history them capture. Snacks up. Check the first chapter. White man done a kill from long before Hitler. KKK is all them say. Don't forget the FTAA. Different inscription. Same subscription. Drug overdose. Economic force. This is not a poem. This is not a prose. Neoliberal overdose. 135.
135. Garvey is still alive. Hello, beautiful people of the Black diasporas and the world. Welcome to the second week of our brand new Unlocking Our Voices, where we work to unlock the voices of the Black diasporas communities. I am your amazing one and only host, Greg Fuller. You just heard our introductory to this episode by Miguel William, aka Stepper, who is a social outreach specialist and a adjunct lecturer, motivational speaker, and is a poet. He is doing remarkable work here in Jamaica at, working with at-risk youth and also at-risk communities. Now, as mentioned during our introductory episode last week, this podcast focuses specifically on the Black diasporas, the issues, the stories, the controversies, the cultures, and the ongoing oppression and injustice faced by our people around the world. Our aim is to connect people of the Black diasporas in new and exciting ways, giving them the chance to seek empowerment by tracing their history and understanding how the past influences the present they live in, and how they hold the keys to shaping everyone's future. We seek to enhance and evolve ourselves socially, politically, economically, and physically by having face-to-face constructive conversations with a diverse, far-reaching list of guests from around the world. Now, I hope last week's introductory episode was a breath of fresh air in the start of unlocking our voices. But that was only the beginning, my friends. We have much to unpack because it is you, the listening audience, that can help change the direction to empower our Black diasporas people. I am just a messenger delivering the message with passion and love for his people. Okay, so let's continue our mission in this episode by setting the scene in the early 20th century, by looking at the Black race conditions across the globe at that time. Africa and the Caribbean were colonized by Europeans. The plight and condition of Black Americans were dictated and ruled by Jim Crow laws and white supremacists. In Latin American countries, they were trying to reinvent themselves through the lens of whiteness, so the majority of them rejected the glorious contribution of Blacks and indigenous people who contributed to their very existence. However, like most oppressed people and their beliefs in a God, they often look for a prophet or a warrior to deliver them out of bondage from their oppressors. For the Black race, a warrior prophet had already been born in St. Anne's Bay, Jamaica on August 17, 1887. His birth signal hope for a downtrodden people. For his words and actions would have profound impact on the black race thinking of themselves and their position in the early 20th century. Unlucky for me, my existence wasn't consummated until 89 years later in Kingston, Jamaica. Oh, well, I say unlucky, guys, not because of my birth, but how magnificent it would have been to gaze on this human being in flesh and to hear his speech, to feel his passion for the love he had for his people and for his race. It would have truly made an impression and impact my life tremendously, because the black pride would have been born at that very moment. My birth on the island nation came 14 years after Jamaica had gained its independence from its colonial master. However, such independence was only in name. Jamaica was, and in many ways, still is a nation subjected to the will of Britain, and some could argue to a larger extent to the United States. The Caribbean nation that had once produced some of the fiercest warriors and black nationalists had forgotten their first national hero in practice, who advocated Africans for the Africans at home and abroad, to be self-reliant, to be self-confident in self, and to think and buy all things black, and to unify under one racial hierarchy. Now, so here we are, right? Talking about this individual. So in this episode, we will divulge into an historical speech that was delivered by this enigmatic warrior prophet in America's history, who held strong beliefs about unifying the black diasporas. Marcus Messiah Garvey was a Jamaican-born nationalist and the leader of the Pan-Africanism movement, which highlighted the common ground between people of African descent across the world and aimed to unify and connect them. So, for this episode, let's call it Unlocking the Voices of the Black Diasporas through Marcus Garvey's legacy. He was the founder of the UNIA, right? The Universal Negro Improvement Association, African Communities and Leagues, a fraternal organization of black nationalists who advocated that peoples of African ancestry should receive separate but equal status and establish independent black states across the world. Marcus Garvey's "Look for Me in the Whirlwind" freedom speech has been such an inspirational and motivational speech for us. We had to give honor and recognition for it being the driving force behind unlocking our voices. Garvey's "Look for Me in the Whirlwind" freedom speech from Syracuse in 1924 is one of his most impactful and powerful works that not only gives us an insight into this charismatic man's views on the role of the black diasporas around the world, but also demonstrates how timeless his vision was, as most of his points made by Garvey still applies to the state of the black diasporas today. We will take a look at some of the passages of Marcus Garvey's famous speech and see if we can find parallels between his description of the state of the black diasporas in the 1920s and the disposition of the black diasporas today. All right? Garvey's speech opened with him paying homage to his ancestors, who he says have suffered and died to give him an education. And it is therefore his responsibility to use the skills he has acquired for the salvation for black people. He states, because whatsoever education I have acquired out of their sacrifice of over 300 years, I shall use for the salvation of the 400 million black people of the world. And the day when I forsake my people, may God Almighty say, there shall be no more life for you. Let me emphasize by repeating this once again. Because whatsoever education I have acquired out of their sacrifice of over 300 years, I shall use for the salvation of the 400 million black people of the world. And the day when I forsake my people, may God Almighty say, there shall be no more life for you. Powerful verse there. This highlights Garvey's role as a strong, influential black leader that had worked effortlessly to serve black people, right, during his lifetime. So as Garvey did, we intend the same for this generation and beyond, right? Now, throughout his speech, Garvey calls for the unity of black people, right, around the world. Later in his speech, he points out that if other races have succeeded in establishing their own leadership, then Africa with 400 million black people can do it. But we would add on to Garvey's speech and say, Africa, India, Bangladesh, and the African diaspora with 3 billion plus black people can do it. All right, I know many of you listening might be shocked because I have mentioned India and Bangladesh as part of the black diasporas. We intend to expand on this in future episodes to come, because those two beautiful black nations are living with amnesia of themselves and their connection to Mama Africa. Exactly a century after Garvey gave this speech, how unified are the black diasporas around the world and in the Americas? Today, a group of contemporary Afro-pessimistic intellectuals argue that Africans and members of the African diaspora around the world have forgotten one another. They claim that the black diasporas tend to view the struggles of the Africans as separate from the specific struggles of black Americans, despite increased migration and communication between the two continents. Additionally, they contended that the United States does not have a dominant economic and political or cultural presence on the African continent as it did in the past. These Afro-pessimistic used the decade of the 1980s as evidence connecting the solidarity between Black American communities and the African continent was when South Africa's apartheid was raging hell on Black South Africans. As such, they used that timeline to connect the Black communities in the United States and the African continent was when the African American civil society, religious and political organizations pressured the U.S. government to limit its support for the apartheid government in South Africa in the 1980s. Although the Reagan administration, including supporters of separation, the public pressure within the American Black community forced the State Department to distance itself from the apartheid government. Unfortunately, they feel this incident is one of the rare moments of solidarity that has emerged between Black people in America and in Africa and the United States. Now, keep in mind, in September 2021, exactly 1 year after the George Floyd protests in the United States, it became clear that the violence and discrimination faced by Black Americans also extended to members of the Black diasporas, as Haitian immigrants were whipped by United States Border Patrol on horseback. There is more need for unity now than ever before, and we must not lose focus on this. Whether we are in Latin America, whether we are in the United States, whether we are in the Caribbean, whether we are based in continental Africa, our unity is essential. Our unity is needed more now than ever before. I personally believe that the lack of unity among the Black diasporas around the world is the reasons why Black representation remains weak in all countries with a Black population, especially countries here in the Americas. Many Afro-descendant communities throughout the Americas are not being represented in society, government institutions, and mass media. This creates a condition in which their presence and influential cultures are often overlooked and eventually erased. For example, in Brazil, around 56% of Brazilians identify as Black. This is the largest population of African descent outside of Africa and India. Yet Black people make up just 18% of Congress and 4.7% of executives in Brazil's 500 largest companies, while 75% of murder victims and 75% of those killed by the police are Black. Despite having an overwhelmingly Black population, the country did not elect a Black mayor until 1996, when Cecil Pitta took office. Now we're talking about 1996. When one thinks about that, it is not that long ago. And make no mistake, my friends, Brazil, by all account, is a Black nation. And there's no doubt. Often when we see video image of Brazil, they tend not to show you the Black Brazilians. But the Black Brazilians are the majority of that country. Now, similarly in Mexico, discrimination based on race negatively impacts Black and indigenous migrants and citizens. In fact, in early 2021, a Ghanaian migrant died of a stroke that could have been prevented in the northern Mexican city of Tijuana, according to a 2017 study conducted by Mexico's National Institute of Statistics. Darker-skinned Mexicans tend to have lower economic or educational attainment. Additionally, Black people migrating to Mexico continue to face discrimination and harassment as anti-Black racism and xenophobia continue to rise against in that country in terms of the non-Black population. All over the world you go, we see this anti-Black movement, this anti-Black hatred for Black people in the United States, this anti-Black hatred for Black people. Even in Jamaica, we see this anti-Black behavior. We see this anti-Black behavior in Latin America. But make no mistake, Black people are hated not because of the issue of slavery, but it is because of our very being, right? Our history is glorious. And living in the United States, we often see that we were not taught about the glory of Africa. We were not taught about the glory of the Black skin, of the darkness of our skin, right? Our skin has always meant something positive. Our skin has always meant something glorious. but we live in an institutionalized racist society that has tried to destroy the beauty and the history, the glorious history of our people, of who we are. Now, when we look at Afro-Mexicans, also suffer from this concept of anti-blackness, in which the black history of more than 2.5 million Afro-Mexicans in the country is being denied to them. This behavior and this ideology is perpetuated by the legacy of slavery and the existence of a racist colonial-era racial caste system that was created by the conquistadors, the Spaniards who conquered that region. But thankfully, there are activists defending the rights of Afro-Mexicans in Mexico who have founded a collectives of non-profit and advocacy organization that work towards dismantling the anti-black racism against Afro-Mexicans. And as I mentioned, in Jamaica, blacks and darker skinned individuals have significantly lower level of household amenities and years of schooling than their non-black and lighter skinned Jamaican counterparts. Garvey mentioned that, according to his critics, the race problem will be solved through higher education, through better education. Then black and white will come together. Garvey believes that they will never come until Africa is redeemed. We too believe in such because of what the evidence and statistics have shown in America's race problem and the global discrimination and marginalization of the beautiful black people. Garvey does not believe that the race problem can be solved in America through higher education. He was convinced that the only way to bring about equality and respect for the black population in the United States is through economic, political, and cultural success on the part of African Americans. We too hold that belief in which Garvey holds. Now, as mentioned, right? So we see that in 2022, in a world plagued with racism and discrimination, is it possible to unify the black people under their African roots and identity and history? In 2021, the United Nations announced that 2015 to 2024 will be called the International Decade for People of African Descent, and that August 31st would be celebrated as the International Day of People of African Descent to promote the extraordinary contributions of the African diaspora around the world and to eliminate all forms of discrimination against people of African descent. Now, these steps taken by the United Nations represents a clear desire to unite the African diaspora around the world. We cannot disregard the fact that as a result of globalization and with increased migration, the black diasporas has been scattered around the world with a large number of black people leaving their home country to move across, to move overseas. These would include the Black Latino, the Afro-Caribbean, the Afro-Asian communities in the United States and in Latin America. One way of unifying the black diasporas without a structure that politically unites us is through our cultural unity. A great example of this would be the American Festival of Kwanzaa, which brings together elements from East Africa and West Africa, and those from the Americas.
Just trying to be treated like a human being, but still this is called a part of America.
In today's financial world where business carry a stronghold, right? A stronghold in the way socio-economic dynamics are built in each country, it is crucial that we continue to nourish and support business people from the Black community to become spokespeople for the Black unity. In 2021, the African Diaspora Network, the African Diaspora Network was founded to invest in Black American entrepreneurs by strengthening, energizing, and supporting small businesses and nonprofit organizations led by Black people in the United States. Interestingly, the organization is led by immigrants from Africa. Founder Almes Negaz, who is an Eritrean American who came to the United States as an immigrant. Their story as Blacks in America started with African Americans who came to the United States as enslaved people. According to Nagash, this tie between Africans living in the United States and Black Americans have tightened, particularly following the murder of George Floyd, as this horrific incident shocked the Black communities as a whole, regardless of the individual country of origin. Now, the African Diaspora Network connects African entrepreneurs to Silicon Valley, to investors, and also reach Black entrepreneurs in the United States. We need more network and association like the African Diaspora Network to help unite the Black diaspora across the globe. Now, it is important because financial unity is what we need. Without financial unity, we often cannot move the Black diaspora in the direction that they are needed. Because when you look at in the United States, it is because of the lack of financial resource. Most or many of the Black communities, I wouldn't say most, but many of the Black communities are facing problems. When we look at in the United States, because of institutionalized racism in terms of the job market, Black people are not paid equally as their white counterparts. And when they're not paid equally as their white counterparts, they are not able to invest properly. They are not able to have money to focus on the community. They're not able to invest properly in their school system. And this has a ripple effect across all aspects relating to Black people. So financial power and financial unity is needed more now than ever before. Without a doubt, education, as I just mentioned, right? So without a doubt, education, the Black diaspora, right? The Black diasporas on their African roots, nurturing and supporting Black leaders are important steps that, is needed to take in unifying the Black diaspora. But Marcus Garvey, in his speech, "Look for Me in the Whirlwind," gives us insight to something much more elementary and personal. Garvey mentioned that we shall teach the Black man to see beauty in his own kind and stop bleaching his skin and otherwise looking like what he's not. He vocalized that, that section is quite a powerful section. When I came to the United States, this beautiful Black skin, I did not see, this country did not teach me or tell me that my beautiful Black skin meant something, right? In fact, most of the thing that I saw was quite negative. But I was coming from a country, right? I was coming from Jamaica. And from that country, the concept and the beauty and the belief in ourselves kept me alive, right? The concept of being proud of my beautiful Black skin. And here Garvey is telling us, we shall teach the Black man to see beauty in his own kind and stop bleaching his skin and otherwise looking like what he is not. He vocalized the thoughts of all black people when he mentioned that black people have hopes, passion, feelings, desire, just like any other race. Let me repeat that line one more again. Garvey vocalized the thoughts of all black people when he mentioned that black people have hopes, we have passions, we have feelings, we have desire, just like any other race. In the kind of world that exists today, where our hopes, our passion, our feelings, and our desires have largely been dismissed, let us not forget that Garvey, elevate us in 1924, and his words echo so loud today in 2022. His words imply that the black diasporas can live up to their full potential and realize its dreams, its self-determination, and empowerment if they can fulfill one important requirement, and that is to have self-love. When you have self-love for yourself and for your people, you can accomplish anything on the face of this planet. Now, during the proliferation of the Harlem Renaissance movement in the 1920s, Garvey was among a number of black intellectuals that have contributed to the empowerment movement, which sparked immense level of self-love among black communities. In the way Garvey's embodied it, self-love refers to the presence of pride among the black community in being part of the black diasporas and its rich history and culture. When you have self-love, you embrace your blackness. When you have self-love, you embrace the people that look like you. You embrace Africa. You embrace your culture when you have self-love. When you have self-love, you do anything you can to uplift that person. You do anything you can to uplift that race. That is how powerful self-love is. Now, during the first, during our introductory episode, we mentioned that some members of the black diasporas in the United States experience an identity crisis when it comes to how they identify themselves. For example, the Afro-Latino community generally identifies with one of their heritage. In most cases, they choose their Latin American culture as their dominant heritage. There is some consensus around the fact that systematic racism and discrimination may be keeping members of this community from identifying themselves as Black Latinos. An article published by the Pew Research Center confirms this very notion that Afro-Latinos with darker skins have more frequently experienced discrimination compared to their non-Latino members of the Latin communities. Now, Garvey's ideal of self-love for Black people, if applied, would eliminate the Black Latinos' desire to identify with only one part of their heritage, and clear the way for this community to love and cherish their Blackness, extending from the Black cultures and history all the way to the beautiful color of their skins. You know, it's a shame, because when you look at many Black people, or dark-skinned Black people, because of the Western society or the Western way of beauty, many Black wants to bleach themselves. Many Blacks wants to perm their hair. Many Blacks want to do things other than being Black, because this country has taught them, meaning the United States, has taught them to hate who they are. But my friends, I wouldn't wish to be anything but Black. As Black as this skin is, it is the most beautiful, the most glorious, this dark skin. And keep in mind, it took time for me to embrace my blackness. Because even though I came from Jamaica, believing this black identity, this country tried, or the United States tried its best to tear down this blackness. But it is because of individuals like Malcolm X. It is because of individuals like Garvey. It is because of the black culture that I was coming from. It taught me a lot to make sure that I never lose perspective of who I am as a black man. Now, Garvey's ideal of black self-love stems from the premises of equality and brotherhood of all men. He also goes on to say that black people are capable of the same acts as other races, possesses under fair circumstance the same intelligence as any other race. So you have heard what Garvey said. Black people are capable of the same acts as any other race, possessing under fair circumstance the same intelligence as any other race. We know that we are living in a society where there is inequity and inequality targeting black people. So the playing field has never been equal for us, even when we possesses the same intelligence as any other race. I have been in situations where I know that I was capable, I was much more talented than my white counterparts. But we know that it was because of the invention of this thing we call whiteness, why they were given more preference. We have to establish our own. If we want to move the race forward, we have to rely on our own. Now, the consciousness of Marcus Garvey's messages scared the majority of white Americans to the point that the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, under its then young leader, our director, J. Edgar Hoover, tried to find ways to silence Garvey's words and messages by having him deported back to Jamaica in 1927. But, little did they knew that the future generations were willing to carry the banner. Garvey's message has influenced so many, from Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Stokely Carmichaels in the United States, and Stephen Bantu Biko of South Africa, to embrace their blackness and to have black pride. Now, on that note, let's look into other messages influential black leaders have left us when it comes to black people adopting this mindset and practice of self-love. Garvey was not the only black leaders who embraced the notion of self-love for black people, because his message would be seated and rooted in the Caribbean, in the United States, and also in Africa. Stephen Bantu Biko, an anti-apartheid activist in South Africa in the 1960s and 1970s, who found the Black Conscious movement which helped mobilize and empower black population to promote the slogan, "Black is beautiful." Biko stated that in his slogan inherently challenged the very deep roots of the black man's belief about himself. He goes on to say that in the African lives, this slogan would also relate to the way women prepare themselves for viewing by society. Biko believes that the way black women fix their hair or apply their makeup tends to be a negation of their true state, and in a sense running away from their culture, their black culture, so to speak. And it's often because we live in a society that tells black people, tells our black women how they should look, how they should carry themselves. in order to fit into this dominant white supremacist culture. He believes, this is Biko, he believes that these women carry the belief that their natural state, which is their black state, will not be considered beautiful. According to Biko, the slogan, "Black is beautiful," challenges exactly that belief, which makes someone negate himself. As I mentioned before, I would not choose anything other than being black. Knowing the history, you understand why people hate you. The historical Black is Beautiful movement is the best remembered when in 1962 a group of black women marched on the catwalk in a fashion show at the Purple Manor nightclub in Harlem, New York, with the notion of celebrating African identity, right? That one event was able to place the slogan "Black is Beautiful" alongside other slogans, which in some sense spawned the civil rights and the Black Power movement. Because, Black is beautiful. Black is tremendously beautiful, my friend. Now, some event believes the Black movement, right, the Black is Beautiful movement, to be the precursor to the Black Panther power. And how did Garvey and Biko words, as well as the brave woman who walked down the catwalk at the Purple Manor, change history? What is the current state of the Black is Beautiful movement today? The movement's influence on contemporary pop culture is undeniable. The slogan has gained more attraction, particularly following the death of George Floyd and the proliferation of the protests against the killing of black people in the United States. Since the message being conveyed by the words goes beyond just the promotion of the concept of black people accepting themselves for who they are, it is also carries with a deeper meaning and demand for equality. I believe that the Black is Beautiful movement, as well as the importance of self-love, should first be taught to our children. Children are like sponges, my friend. They absorb everything that is thrown at them. And in most cases, their habits and thinkings are impacted heavily by the experience they have when they are young. So it is important, to teach and to tell our young kids how beautiful they are, right? And that includes both our young girls and our young boys. We need to teach our beautiful black children the importance of self-love, whether they are part of the Black Latino, African American, Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Asian communities, or in other parts of the world. We need to support the publication of children's books, games, and toys that promote self-love among black children. Some schools seem, however, to be already adopting this practice, right? When we look at Miss Imgrim, early childhood, pre-K 3 class at the Inspired Teaching Demonstration, PCS launched activities around the theme, Black is Beautiful. Each day, students will work together to create a Black is Beautiful mural. Students will also examine an illustration from the book, Children of the Civil Rights Movement, and share what they see, what they think, wonder about this picture. This is where a lot of work falls on our educators, parents, our communities, so that we can have a new generation of black people that grow up with a full understanding of what self-love means. It is tremendously important. When it comes to my kids, I constantly tell them you're beautiful. I constantly remind them of the beauty of who they are and where they're coming from. I constantly teach them and tell them about the glory of their history, not only in the past, but also in the present, because the black culture is powerful, the black culture is dominant. Now, let's go back to Garvey's and his speech. Garvey was aware of the power of religion, particularly Christianity, on the black community. According to Garvey, the biblical injunction of Acts 17:26 reminds us that God created one blood and all nations of man to dwell on the face of the earth, and that are most interested in brotherhood within their own race. He also goes on to say that if black people are created in God's image and black people are black, then God must be black in some sense. Make no mistake about that, my friends. Garvey, so beloved, gives us an insight to ourselves and the Creator. And for me, when I was living in Mexico City, it was where I first saw the image of a black Jesus, or black Yahshua, as he's supposed to be called Yahshua. And in one of the cathedral in downtown Mexico. That had such a profound impact on me, because I had to come to Mexico, in Mexico City, to see an image of the black Yahshua. How magnificent it was, truly magnificent to see. In the same speech, Garvey also states that he unequivocally rejects the racist assumption of much of white American Christianity, namely that God had created the black man inferior, and that he had intended black people to be servant class, hoovers of wood and dryer of water. Garvey rejects this view and embraced the doctrine that all men, regardless of color, are created in the image of God. This brings me to the issue that is still relevant today and is not often talked about, which is the impact that painting God as a white man has on how racial stereotypes are maintained in a world where they need to be broken down. According to an article published by the Scientific Americans in 2020, persuasive racial images associated with the Almighty shapes who people see as worthy of being in charge, right? Statistics show that despite a push to implement diversity programs within the corporate world, there is still a lack of black representation in managerial positions. And, we see that often, in the United States. When I was, growing up and I was going to high school, I often see most of the people that were in power, they were white people. And, I rejected that dominance, that white dominance, that white superiority, because I was coming from a country that I saw black people in charge. But when I came to the United States, even in the community, in the neighborhood that I used to live, the police officers, they were often white. And I rejected that. I rejected to be subdued or to be dominated by white culture. And when I say white culture, I'm talking about the racist, institutionalized practice and behavior. I refuse to submit to white supremacists. There were, so back to Garvey's view, there were only 5 black CEOs on the 2020 Fortune 500 companies list, which means that black CEOs make up only 1% of the list, despite African Americans representing 13.4% of the US population. But still we see that black people weren't being represented in true numbers. And it is the same thing to this very day. Often when we go into, especially if we go into privileged positions, we often see the dominant white culture that are being in charge. Even though you might be more qualified, you might be more experienced, but you're not given a fair opportunity to show your gifted talent. Garvey's speech is as relevant today as it was in the 1920s. But keep in mind, this society, we need to break down this society that wants to dominate based on white supremacies. All right, I hope you have enjoyed this beautiful introductory into Garvey's Look for Me in the Whirlwind. We have come to a close to this episode, and I hope by listening, or if you are watching us on our YouTube channel, you are beginning to see the profound need for our unity as the Black diasporas. Because unity comes with strength, and with strength we can accomplish real political, economic, and social power. So don't be discouraged, because we will continue our discussion on Marcus Garvey's speech, Look for Me in the Whirlwind, next week. So until then, I want you to stay safe. I want you to continue uplifting each other. And thanks for tuning in, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
If you enjoyed Unlocking Our Voices, recommend us and let's grow our conversations, community, and power. Stay tuned for our next episode, and don't forget to sign up for our notifications. Find us on social media at Unlocking Our Voices and on our website at www.unlockingourvoices.com. Thanks for listening and helping to amplify the voices of the Black diasporas.